What is up, down, and sideways, you fantastic individuals? It's another Reppy of League Unlock. Eric and Mark here with you beauties as it's full playoff push across all these major regions. So before it gets, to finals and we don't have as many teams to pick, we're making our picks for which squad, just one, is going to be representing their region at the first ever First Stand event in Seoul, in South Korea. And obviously this is going to be full fearless, so you can talk about the teams being the best to get there, blah, 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 implementing this fearless draft. But first, they do have to actually qualify. And some regions, yes, there's favorites that are maybe the easier pick, but we're throwing a little spice in these picks as well.
Sometimes it's a balance, right? You got to be going for who you favorite, who you think is that strongest team. But sometimes the strongest team doesn't always line up with what is the interesting angle. And sometimes that interesting angle, we always know, can be that spark that finds its way on through it. And so that's where sifting through these playoff pictures and kind of trying to find these teams and where they're at with it.
And we're starting hometown for us, LTA. I'm even going to say LTA North because it's the only 4 squads left for the qualifying. And this is maybe the region with the least major favorite that are left, because I feel like it's contentious who the favorite actually is in the Final 4.
And that's partly because I think teams like FlyQuest and Team Liquid haven't necessarily shown us that next big leap or big stride as far as their progression and talent from where they were last year and the last time we saw them around. And teams like 100 Thieves, like Cloud9, have taken those strides, have improved, have a different angle to them, and are showing us that maybe it's not that lock and guarantee that it will be one of the established FlyQuest or Team Liquids that will be going and being that representative for the LTA. You have to consider both of the positive options with 100 Thieves and Cloud9.
And with looking at the short body of work so far, I'm leaning to Cloud9. They've looked the cleanest in their wins. All you have to look at is they have the least deaths per game among all major regions, and they've been winning games without needing to rely on messy team fights where they just hands diff the opposition. They've had clean objective control and just fully been in control in most of these games. My only question mark for them is getting into extended fearless draft games 4 or 5, which will only happen once in this playoff bracket. But I heard Vulcan and Sven both talking about they hate the idea of having to play trash champions when you get into the nitty-gritty of a game 5.
And that's something that we have talked about when you get into the game 4s, the game 5s, Fearless Draft Series, where it really starts to narrow down. It not necessarily is about can you pick a good champion, can you pick a meta champion type of thing. It's can you truly assemble a cohesive composition, one that can work together, one that has an identity on the Rift. These type of things, it becomes harder to find that combination, and especially with limited champion pools, as we're hearing, I think can be some type of a strategy issue for Cloud9. That's something I would be concerned about with them, but as you've laid out, potentially could only happen once in this LTA playoffs. A little bit of an oversight, if you ask me, but that's the one for Cloud9. For me, I would like to take Cloud9. I think Cloud9 is the more interesting angle, more of a explosive option for the LTA if that is the team that does rise to the very top. For me, I'm going with FlyQuest. That is a relatively safe answer I'll go with for the LTA. I'll take that hit, but I think right now with this team, with Fearless Draft, with players like Whippo and Inspired, what we saw from Masu, and especially then this year, Quad taking that next step and really delivering and taking a charge for the team, I like my chances with FlyQuest as my choice.
Yeah, I think those are the two best answers because 100 Thieves can be so volatile and because Team Liquid has looked shaky, to say the least, even in some of these wins that they've been picking up this year. LEC side of things, we've still got a lot of teams that could make a miracle push, and I think G2, since they've leveled up, is, again, should and will always be the favorites in Europe until they're fully eliminated from a playoff push. But I don't know. It feels like there's a little bit of magic cooking around this blue wall on Carmine Corp. Obviously, they have the fans fully behind them. And as we kind of alluded to in the preseason, all 5 of these guys have something to prove. And so far, they've been proving it. And talking about a guy we've talked about not enough with this team for me is Yike, who has probably been the best jungler in Europe this split.
And you know what? Guilty as charged for talking about so many of the other factors, so many of the other things with Carmine Corp before you really do get to put any praise onto Yike. And he does deserve it, because a lot of the things that are going positive, that are right for this team, the reason why things do look so different, not just Khalees, not just all these other options you can talk about, it is Yike and his effect in the jungle, his communication, his choices. These are impactful things for this blue wall of Carmine Corp and the changes that they have made to be this top competitive team in the LEC. There isn't a more interesting angle than talking about Carmine Corp, or having them be the team that does represent and get this experience for the LEC. That doesn't mean it's a guarantee, though, because I think underestimating a squad like G2 will be something that will always sink you down in the LEC when you come to playoff time, knowing the type of preparations they can make, the differences they can make in a series with players like Broken Blade, Claps in the mid lane, and heck, even now, you're seeing it from Skumon and LeBron find ways to get involved and get things going, and that involves getting the engine of Hansama revved up in the bottom lane.
And, whenever they do have these roster boosts, G2, that hunger is kind of reignited to win again. There's never that stagnation, but just feel like the KC boys are a little hungrier to prove themselves as that premier squad in EU.
I think that's a good guess, and as well, you can still then, whether you're how strong you're feeling about Carmine Corp or G2, you can look to some of the other options. Fnatic still hanging around, still looking for that rebound bounce back. You can go down. Maybe you are truly a NA nutso whatso head case, and you're believing in Jojo Pyun and the Mad Lion, Movistar Koi rebound in that lower bracket. That's another one on the
-1. Yeah.
That one in there. And then even Giant X, if you really want to go all the way down and you're still betting on it, for me individually, I think Giant X still needs more time, more splits to keep improving and figuring things out. But you never know in these playoff type of situation in the LEC. That all depends just how far in front or how close you think it is between a G2 and a Carmine Corp at the front of the LEC, and then you bring in up the rest of the group behind it.
Just like G2 are the favorites until they're beaten, I can't believe in Fnatic in these best ofs until they've won. They're like the other end of that spectrum. I just don't have the full faith of them in this playoff push. But you go to the LCK now, and that's the easiest one, purely because there's only 3 teams. It's really narrowed down. Obviously, I think a lot of people would pick T1 if they were still around in this push, but I think I'm just going to assume there's no way either of us are picking Gen G as the remaining 3 that are going through, but I'm leaning towards, even though they just lost the head-to-head, D plus Kia. They had angles to win that game 5. They were in control at points, and I feel like Fearless Draft, as we've seen, suits this team that they are going to cook up. I know they got something left, a few bullets in the chamber that nobody's seen yet in Korea.
How wild is the LCK this split, that I can tell you that the team with Chovy and Ruler in the same lineup is not the expected team to get out of this. Holy cow. Things are truly crazy in the LCK, and that means that we are talking about D plus Kia and Hanwha Life at that very front. How does D plus Kia find a way to change their fortunes around? What is truly the difference in that 5-game series that is between you being the champion and you being the loser on the day type of thing, is to sort out before we get to this one. Of course, there is that matchup with Gen G upcoming that we will, obviously have to cover, but it really is down to those 2 teams for me is the expectation. And when it comes into that matchup, what are the changes? How do you approach this differently compared to the last series in your preparation and draft, pick and ban, all these things? And with a guy like Commander Barrel on your side, that's where I'm thinking there will be some impactful changes. Some things are going to be different for this D plus Kia this time around, and that is what I'm waiting for.
And by the way, we did a little poll on YouTube for who's going from the LCK. 60% people saying Hanwha Life are the squad that's going to represent. I get it. They just beat D+. I get it.
And I think that a lot of people, very rightfully so, picking Hanwha Life in that situation, seeing that head-to-head against D plus Kia, seeing again the signs of this team, not only what signs that you saw last year that made you buy in and why they are LCK Summer Champions, but you're seeing the improvement. You're seeing the reason why they went out in the offseason, spent the big bucks on Mr. Zeus in the top side, what type of effect he can have in an individual game, in a series performance, what he can bring to this team, that team fighting, how he fits alongside what you already have as strengths in Peanut in the jungle, and how he can do things. This is a Hanwha Life team that is incredibly lethal.
Last region, LPL action. This is the hardest one, for sure. Number one, playoffs haven't actually started, so we got full 8 teams lined up. And number two, outside of BLG as the big favorites, and let's not forget, BLG are coming in the losers bracket as a 2 seed, so that already kind of blows up who you had as a favorite. This bracket is wide open. There is no second team that you're putting ahead of the rest of the group when you look at the 3-0 squads. 3 out of 4 of these teams, if you predicted them in the preseason, people would think you're losing your minds. But I'm going with not only the best logo that's left, but the most hope. And I'm talking about Anyone's Legend, a clean 3-0. They had top eSports in their group, maybe the toughest number 2 seed that we had in the, although BLG, a number 2 seed. But, and obviously all these numbers so far they're pretty much right behind NIP in all the major team statistical categories, but they have less question marks than NIP for me because 3/5 of this roster proved last year that they can contend with some of the best teams in the LPL, and then you bring in Tarzan. I'm scared of matching up against Anyone's Legend.
Oh, I had a feeling, and I was hoping you were gonna say Anyone's Legend. I'm proud of my boy right there, respecting and taking his chance on the Anyone Legend squad, and very good one to take that risk on and see what we have seen so far as you laid out the 3 returning members, and they've already proven what they can do with this team and how to take it to that next level. It's tough in the LPL because of such a limited amount of games to go off of, and knowing, well, again, what type of road and mountain is left in front of you of the playoffs to still go through. That's quite a lot more than the runway room we have to judge you on from this early part type of thing. For me, I'm going doing B. I'm going NIP. I'm taking them all the way. I think
taking the MVP of 9 games.
Yeah, I might seem a little cheap in that type of one, which, by the way, the fact that the LPL is doing not only a split MVP, has half split MVP,
3 series.
They're doing 3 all-pro teams at
Come
the 3K. What is this? Pretty crazy, but I'm taking NIP. I've seen enough with this team. I think there are other angles and opportunities still, but it really is about what Doing B represents to this team, what type of options he brings throughout a draft, through a series. That's what I'm going with in the LPL.
And hey, listen, that's a first round matchup, NIP versus AL. Obviously, both got a losers bracket run that they can fall back to, but both our squads playing right away.
And this is one of those ones where, again, this isn't really about a situation where, oh my God, BLG is so bad type of thing. This really is more so that BLG has actually made a slip up, made the mistake, where the rest of the LPL is now in that same conversation. They're in that same type of realm where you can consider these upsets. You can talk about these teams making a different type of run, and not envisioning that building block of a BLG bin wall standing in front of you and denying your trip to the finals. I think it's a little bit more open this time around, which leads to, throwing out names like Anyone's Legend, NIP, throw maybe the IG reunion in there. JDG is still performing at a very high level and is very enticing with players like Pays and Scout. So still are a lot of options in the LPL.
Yeah, with BLG kind of being knocked down a peg, it really feels like all 8 of these teams are like compact to such comparable levels. Like if you assume, let's say Anyone's Legend is the 1 seed, then what's the 8 seed? Like Weibo would be the 8 seed at that point. Like it's anyone can beat anyone in this LPL playoff bracket.
I was just about to say, well, you could throw in teams like Weibo, even top eSports hanging around. All these type of guys are going to be involved in this type of situation, and especially with such a little amount of games to really go off of, hard to make that concrete prediction type of feeling type of one. You got to go more so with your gut than anything here when you're talking about the LPL, and that's why I'm hanging my hat on my boy Doing B and expecting him in the NIP squad to get it done.
But any of these teams, full best of fives the whole way through, makes for LPL probably going to be the most interesting playoff bracket, especially when you compare it to some of these other yucky formats that we're getting. But full playoff kickoff this weekend. More in the LCK. We got finals. We got LTA finals and LEC rolling on. So lots of games that we're going to get to next week. But that is it today for Liga Unlock. Eric and Mark here with you. Absolute beauties. Thanks for hanging out. You know we will catch you on that flippity flip.